In the deepest shadows of the galaxy, beyond the sight of the Jedi and the histories of the Republic, there lies a knowledge that is not merely forbidden, but is anathema to life itself. It is a whisper in the void, a promise of power that transcends the simplistic dichotomy of light and dark, offering instead the keys to dominion over the very fabric of existence. This is the realm of Sith sorcery, an art born not of balance, but of ambition, fueled not by harmony, but by the raw, untamed energies of fear, hatred, and pain. It is the practice of bending the Force to one's will, of twisting it into a weapon, a shield, and a tool for reshaping reality. The rituals of the Sith are not prayers or meditations. They are acts of supreme arrogance, declarations of war against the natural order. They are the means by which mortals seek to become gods, and in their pursuit, they unleash horrors that can poison stars and echo through eternity. To understand these rites is to gaze into an abyss from which there is no return, to learn the secret language of corruption that promises everything and demands nothing less than one's soul. The story of these rituals is the story of the Sith themselves, a chronicle of their rise from primitive savagery to galactic terror, written in the blood of the sacrificed and the ashes of conquered worlds. The origins of this dark power are ancient, predating the Jedi and the Republic by millennia, rooted in the primal fears of sentient life. Long before the first Dark Lords carved out their empire, other species had brushed against the darkness. The Rakata, with their twisted fusion of technology and the Force, built a galactic empire on a foundation of slavery and consumption, their power derived from a violent, dominating connection to the dark side. But their knowledge was crude, their understanding incomplete. The true genesis of Sith magic as a refined and terrible art began on a desolate, red rock world shrouded in perpetual twilight. Korriban. This was the homeworld of the Sith species, a race of crimson-skinned humanoids who evolved in one of the galaxy's harshest environments. For them, the Force was not a gentle, flowing river of life. It was a violent, predatory current, a reflection of their own brutal existence. Survival on Korriban demanded strength, cunning, and an utter ruthlessness that became ingrained in their very being and in their connection to the cosmic energy that surrounded them. Their society was rigidly stratified, with the cunning and force-sensitive Kisai priest caste ruling over the physically powerful Massassi warrior caste. The Kisai were the first true Sith sorcerers. Their magic was not yet the sophisticated alchemy of later eras, but a raw, instinctual craft tied to blood, bone, and the potent dark side nexuses that saturated their world. They performed guttural incantations in the ancient Sith tongue, a language that itself seemed to resonate with the dark side. Their rituals were centered on life, death, and power. They would divine the future by reading the entrails of slain beasts. They would brew potions to grant their warriors unnatural strength, and they would call upon the storms that raked their planet's surface to smite their enemies. Their most significant rites revolved around death. The Sith revered their dead, not out of love or respect, but out of a deep-seated belief that the spirits of the powerful could linger, offering wisdom and strength from beyond the grave. The Valley of the Dark Lords on Korriban was a testament to this belief. A vast necropolis of monumental tombs built to honor and appease their most powerful kings and sorcerers. These were not mere graves, they were batteries of dark side energy, each one a focal point where the spirit of the deceased was anchored to the physical world. The construction of a tomb was a massive ritual in itself. involving the sacrifice of countless slaves whose life force was used to consecrate the stones and empower the lingering spirit of the interred lord. This early sorcery, while primitive, was profoundly powerful because it was pure, an undiluted expression of the Sith species' will to dominate their environment and destiny. They did not seek to understand the Force, they sought only to command it, to make it serve their ambition. This foundation of primal magic and raw power, nurtured in the blood-red sands of Korriban for thousands of years, was a sleeping giant, a wellspring of darkness waiting for the catalyst that would awaken it and unleash it upon an unsuspecting galaxy. That catalyst would come not from the depths of space, but from the heart of the Jedi Order itself. The schism was inevitable. Within the nascent Jedi Order, a philosophical divide grew into a chasm. Some Jedi, brilliant and ambitious, chafed under the strictures of the Jedi Code. They argued that emotions were not weaknesses to be suppressed, but strengths to be harnessed. They delved into aspects of the Force that their masters deemed forbidden, exploring the intoxicating power that came from rage and passion. They believed that true mastery of the Force required embracing all of its aspects, not just the placid and serene. This ideological conflict erupted into a brutal civil war that history would remember as the 100-Year Darkness. The Jedi who followed the light fought against their fallen brethren, the Dark Jedi, in a conflict that scarred many worlds. In the end, the followers of the light were victorious. The surviving Dark Jedi, a group of a dozen or so powerful masters of the forbidden arts, were defeated and cast out from the Republic. They were loaded onto unarmed vessels and exiled into the unknown regions, sent away to contemplate their defeat, and the Jedi hoped to fade into obscurity. But the Force, or perhaps some darker will, guided their journey. Their ships, battered and lost, eventually stumbled upon a red, dusty star system and the planet Korriban. When the exiles landed, they found a world steeped in the dark side, inhabited by a species that practiced a raw and potent form of sorcery. The exiles were gods among primitives. They possessed lightsabers, advanced technology, and a sophisticated, theoretical understanding of the Force that far surpassed the instinctual magic of the Kisai priests. The reigning Sith King, Hakagram Grouch, challenged the newcomers, but he was no match for their leader, Ajunta Pall, a master of combat and the dark side. Pall struck down the Sith King, and through a combination of overwhelming power and cunning manipulation, the exiles subjugated the entire Sith species. They were not merely conquerors, they became the new gods of Korriban, the Dark Jedi, now the Lords of the Sith, interbred with the high-ranking Kisai, their bloodlines mingling over generations. This fusion was the true birth of the Sith Order as the galaxy would come to know it. It was a perfect storm of corruption. The exiles brought their advanced knowledge of the Force, their alchemical sciences, and their philosophical framework of power. The native Sith brought their primal connection to the dark side, their traditions of blood sacrifice, and their mastery of raw sorcery. Together, they forged a new path. The crude incantations of the Kisai were refined by the exiles' understanding of Force manipulation. The simple act of creating a Force-imbued sword was elevated into the complex art of Sith alchemy, twisting metal and crystal into weapons that could not only cut flesh, but also drain the life and spirit of an opponent. The practice of building tombs evolved into a science of creating dark side nexuses, places where a Sith Lord's spirit could be preserved indefinitely, their consciousness bound to their remains and their artifacts. Rituals became far more elaborate and powerful. The exiles introduced the concept of focusing their collective power, teaching the Sith that a group of sorcerers working in concert could achieve feats that a single individual could only dream of. They codified the language of the dark side, creating formal spells and rites for everything from enhancing their own physical abilities to tearing open hyperspace lanes through sheer force of will. The title of Dark Lord of the Sith was born in this era, a designation for the supreme ruler of this new Sith Empire. It was under their guidance that the Sith began to look beyond Korriban, their ambition now kindled by the exiles' memory of a vast republic that had cast them out. They began to build fleets, to train armies, and to perfect their dark arts, all in preparation for the day they would return to the galaxy not as exiles, but as its rightful masters. This period of isolation, lasting for thousands of years, was the crucible in which the most terrible rituals were forged, a golden age of darkness, where the unholy union of Jedi knowledge and Sith savagery gave rise to an empire built on fear and powered by the forbidden arts. The nascent Sith Empire grew in isolation, a cancer in the unknown regions, its power swelling with each passing century. This was the Golden Age of the Sith, a time when their dominion was absolute within their corner of the galaxy, and their mastery over the dark side reached an unprecedented zenith. The rituals perfected during this era became the foundation of all Sith power to come, a dark grimoire written in the annals of their conquests. At the heart of this empire were figures of immense power, dark lords whose names became synonymous with terror and sorcery. Two such lords, rivals whose ambitions would eventually tear the empire apart, exemplified the peak of this ritualistic power: Ludo Kresh and Naga Sado. Kresh was a purist, a believer in preserving the Sith bloodlines and traditions, his power rooted in the ancient ways. Sado, however, was a visionary, a master of deception and alchemy who sought to expand the Empire and crush the Republic his ancestors had been exiled from. It was Naga Sado who demonstrated the terrifying scale that Sith rituals could achieve. He was a sorcerer of unparalleled skill, and his greatest feats were illusions, but illusions so powerful they were indistinguishable from reality. On the eve of his great war against the Republic, Sado gathered his fleet and his most powerful Sith magicians within his meditation sphere, a mobile command center designed to focus and amplify force energies. From this sphere, he performed a grand ritual of Sith magic. Channeling the fear and hatred of all his followers, he projected vast phantoms across the battlefield. Republic forces would see their single Sith opponent as a legion of Massassi warriors, a lone Sith warship as an entire armada. These were not mere holograms. They were manifestations of the dark side, phantasms that could inspire terror and confusion, turning the tide of battle through psychological warfare on a cosmic scale. Sado's power extended even to the stars themselves. In one of his most infamous acts, he used a superweapon powered by an amplified focusing crystal, channeling his dark side energies through it to trigger a solar flare, causing a star to go nova and annihilating an entire Republic fleet along with the Kron star cluster. This was not technology alone, it was a ritual. Using a technological artifact as a fulcrum to leverage the sorcerer's will against the very laws of physics, a testament to the Sith belief that nothing was beyond their power to command. Central to this era was the perfection of Sith alchemy. This was far more than simply transmuting metals. It was the dark art of twisting life, of corrupting the Force's natural expression to create abominations. Sith alchemists were artists of perversion. They would take living creatures, from the humble Neek to the mighty Terentatek, and subject them to horrific rituals. Using specially crafted Sith alembics and crucibles, they would bombard the subjects with raw dark side energy, injecting them with alchemically created poisons and mutagens. The creature's body and spirit would be warped, its natural form broken down and remade into a reflection of its creator's malice. This is how the legions of Sith spawn were created. The hulking, saber-toothed Tukata, known as Sith Hounds, were bred to be guardians of the tombs on Korriban, their intelligence and ferocity enhanced by alchemy. The serpentine Hasis, or dark-side dragons, were infused with so much dark energy that their very presence could poison the environment around them, and their bite could sever a Jedi's connection to the Force. The most terrible of these creations were the Leviathans, colossal bioweapons grown in vast vats, living creatures of immense size and destructive power, controlled by the will of their Sith masters. This alchemical knowledge was also applied to inanimate objects. Sith Lords learned to imbue their weapons and armor with the dark side. A Sith sword was not merely a sharpened piece of metal. It was forged in a ritual that could take weeks, quenched in the blood of sacrifices, and inscribed with runes of power. The finished blade was almost sentient, resonating with a hateful energy that made it unnaturally durable and capable of resisting a lightsaber's blade. More than that, such a weapon could inflict wounds that would not heal. Wounds that festered in the spirit as much as the flesh. Amulets were crafted to ward off psychic attacks, gauntlets to enhance a user's strength, and armor that could feed on the pain of its wearer to repair itself. Every aspect of the Sith Empire, from its armies to its architecture, was saturated with the power of these rituals, creating a civilization that was not just evil, but a living embodiment of the dark side itself. The engine that powered these monumental feats of sorcery and alchemy was the darkest and most fundamental of all. Sith practices, sacrifice. For the Sith, life was a currency, a raw resource to be harvested and expended in the pursuit of greater power. They understood on a profound level that the act of extinguishing a life, especially a life rich in the Force, released a torrent of energy into the Force. A properly conducted ritual could capture this energy and redirect it to fuel a spell, empower an artifact, or create a lasting dark side nexus. Blood was the most common medium for this transfer. Sith altars were stained with the blood of centuries, and the incantations of many rites were written in it. A blood sacrifice was not merely an act of killing, it was a carefully orchestrated ceremony. The victim's fear and pain were cultivated, amplified, because these emotions themselves resonated with the dark side, making the final release of life force all the more potent. Mass sacrifices were reserved for the most ambitious undertakings. Before a great battle, a Sith Lord might oversee the ritual slaughter of thousands of slaves, their collective death cry serving as a wave of dark energy that would demoralize the enemy and invigorate the Sith armies. The very stones of Sith temples and fortresses were consecrated with the life force of those who built them, their essences trapped within the walls to create a permanent atmosphere of dread and power. This principle of domination extended beyond mere sacrifice. The Sith sought to control not just the bodies but the minds and souls of others. They developed a host of rituals designed for mental subjugation. The spell of madness was a terrifying psychic assault that required the sorcerer to weave a complex web of force energy around a target's mind, shattering their sanity and turning them into a gibbering wreck or a berserker who would attack their own allies. More subtle was the art of creating mental prisons, where a Sith could trap a victim's consciousness within their own mind, leaving them in a catatonic state while the Sith rifled through their thoughts at leisure. The ritual of drain knowledge was a particularly horrific violation. The Sith sorcerer would physically and psychically link with their captive, using the dark side to forcibly tear information, memories, and skills from their mind. The process was agonizing for the victim and often left them a mindless, empty shell, their entire being consumed to serve the Sith's lust for knowledge. But the ultimate expression of the Sith, desire for control, was their war against death itself. To a Sith, death was the ultimate failure, the final, undeniable proof that one was not powerful enough. The pursuit of immortality became the singular obsession of many of the greatest Dark Lords. Early attempts were crude, relying on alchemical potions and life-extending rituals that could keep a body alive for centuries, but often at the cost of monstrous disfigurement. A more potent method was the creation of talismans and amulets that could house a portion of the user's spirit, allowing them to cling to a semblance of existence even after their body had failed. The true prize, however, was the ritual of essence transfer. This was the pinnacle of Sith sorcery, a terrifying and profoundly unnatural act that allowed a Sith Lord to transplant their consciousness, their very soul, from one body to another. The ritual was incredibly complex and fraught with peril. It required the Sith to completely detach their spirit from their physical form through intense meditation and force of will. This disembodied spirit would then seek a new vessel, which could be a willing acolyte, a helpless prisoner, or even a specially prepared clone body. The process was an assault, a spiritual violation where the Sith spirit would overwhelm and extinguish the consciousness of the new host, seizing control of their body. Great Dark Lords like Darth Sidious and later Darth Bane became masters of this technique, cheating death for millennia. It was the ultimate act of selfishness, a declaration that one's own existence was more important than the natural cycle of the Force, and it was a path that inevitably led to a fractured, parasitic existence, forever craving new hosts to sustain a spirit that should have long since passed into the cosmic force. The galaxy is littered with the scars left by these forbidden practices, worlds poisoned and histories rewritten by the consequences of a single, powerful Sith ritual. These were not abstract exercises in power. They had tangible, devastating, and often eternal repercussions. The story of the planet Onderon and its centuries of darkness serves as a stark testament to the lingering influence of just one Dark Lord. Frida Nad was a Jedi Knight, brilliant and proud, who fell to the dark side, convinced that the Jedi's teachings were limiting his true potential. He journeyed into the forgotten corners of the galaxy, seeking out the lost tombs of the ancient Sith Empire. On Korriban, he communed with the spirits of the first Dark Lords and learned their secrets of alchemy and sorcery. He eventually traveled to the jungle moon of Dek-Sun, where he found the tomb of Naga Sato and completed his training, becoming a true Dark Lord of the Sith. He then conquered the primitive world of Onderon, ruling it as a king and god. When he finally died, his body was interred in a massive, force-resistant tomb, but his death was not an end. Using the rituals he had learned, Nad had anchored his spirit to his tomb and his worldly possessions. his malevolent consciousness lingered, a phantom of pure dark side energy that seeped out into the world. For 400 years, his spirit whispered to his descendants, the royalty of Onderon, corrupting them and teaching them the ways of the dark side. This incited a brutal, centuries-long civil war on the planet, the Beast Wars, fought between the city-dwelling humans and the rugged beast riders of the wilds. The entire planet became a dark side nexus, its very soil saturated with the hatred and violence that Friedenad's lingering spirit had fostered. Jedi who came to the world found their connection to the light suppressed, their senses clouded by the oppressive aura of darkness. Nad's influence was a plague that could not be cleansed, a ghost that continued to manipulate the living long after his body had turned to dust, a perfect illustration of how a Sith ritual could create an echo that outlasted its creator. An even more catastrophic example can be found in the tale of Exar Kun. Like Nad, Kun was a charismatic and powerful Jedi Knight, but his arrogance and insatiable curiosity led him down the same dark path. Intrigued by whispers of ancient Sith power, he sought out the tomb of Frieden Nad on Deexon. There, the spirit of Nad appeared to him, seducing him with promises of knowledge and power. Nad orchestrated events that caused Kun to be crushed by a cave-in, and as the Jedi lay dying, Nad offered him a choice: embrace the dark side and be healed, or die. Kun chose life, and in that moment of desperation and rage, he was forever lost. He traveled to Korriban, where he destroyed the spirits of the ancient Dark Lords and declared himself their successor. He then journeyed to the fourth moon of Yavin, a former outpost of Naga Sado. There, he enslaved the primitive Massassi race and, using their labor and Sith alchemy, transformed them into monstrously powerful warriors. He built immense temples, not for worship, but to act as focusing lenses for dark side energy. When the Jedi Order and the Republic finally came for him, cornering him on Yavin 4, Exar Kun performed his final and most terrible ritual. He knew he could not defeat the combined might of thousands of Jedi. Instead, he chose a different kind of victory. He gathered every living Massassi on the moon before his grand temple. Chanting in the ancient Sith tongue, he initiated the rite of supremacy. The ritual was a colossal act of sacrifice. Kun drew upon the life force of every single Massassi, draining them of their vitality, their spirits, their very connection to the Force. Thousands of beings were extinguished in an instant, their life energy siphoned directly into Exar Kun's body. The wave of power was immense, a psychic scream that echoed across the galaxy. With this stolen energy, Exar Kun performed the impossible. He sundered his spirit from his flesh. His body was incinerated, but his consciousness, now an entity of pure, malevolent dark side energy, was bound to the temples he had built. He had achieved a form of immortality, but at a terrible price. He was no longer a man, but a spectral prisoner, his power trapped within the stone walls of his temples on Yavin 4. The Jedi, believing him vanquished, left the moon, but the consequences of his ritual endured for 4,000 years. The temples remained a potent dark side nexus, a place of profound corruption that would later be used as a base by the Rebel Alliance, its heroes oblivious to the ancient evil that slept beneath their feet. Exar Kun's ritual demonstrates the ultimate Sith ethos, a willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone, including oneself in a way, for the sake of power and defiance against mortality. The old Sith Empire, with its legions of warriors and grand public rituals, ultimately collapsed under the weight of its own internal conflicts. The Dark Lords, consumed by their own ambition, inevitably turned on one another, their infighting proving to be a greater threat than the Jedi ever were. This cycle of self-destruction culminated in the Seventh Battle of Ruusan, a cataclysmic conflict that saw the end of the Brotherhood of Darkness, the dominant Sith faction of the era. It was here that a visionary Sith Lord named Darth Bane would use a forgotten and terrible ritual to reshape the future of the Sith forever. Bane recognized that the Sith's weakness was their numbers. Their nature made them rivals, not allies. He devised a plan to destroy the old order and rebuild it from the ashes, stronger and more focused. He manipulated the leader of the Brotherhood of Darkness, Lord Khan, into performing a ritual known as the Thought Bomb. Khan, driven to desperation by the relentless Jedi assault led by Lord Hoth, gathered all of his most powerful Sith Lords in a cave. Bane had deceptively taught him this ritual as a last resort, a weapon that could destroy the Jedi army. The ritual required the Sith Lords to pool their collective energy, focusing all of their hatred, fear, and despair into a single, unified psychic force. As the Jedi stormed the caves, the Sith unleashed the Thought Bomb. The result was a psychic detonation of unimaginable power. A sphere of pure, destructive energy erupted, incinerating the bodies of both the Jedi and Sith caught within its blast. But its true horror was what it did to their spirits. The Thought Bomb did not just kill, it consumed souls. The consciousness of every Force-sensitive individual caught in the blast, Jedi and Sith alike, was ripped from their bodies and trapped within a swirling vortex of energy, a translucent globe of eternal torment. Their spirits were fused into a collective, forever locked in a state of agony and madness. With this single, devastating ritual, Darth Bane accomplished his goal. The Jedi believed the Sith were extinct, wiped out to the last. Bane, having escaped the blast, was the sole survivor. He found a young apprentice and instituted a new philosophy that would govern the Sith for the next millennium: the rule of two. There would be only two Sith at any one time, a master to embody the power, and an apprentice to crave it. This fundamental shift in structure necessitated a profound change in the nature of Sith rituals. The grand, ostentatious ceremonies of the old empire were no longer possible or desirable. Mass sacrifices, legions of alchemically engineered monsters, and armies of dark side acolytes were tools of open warfare, a strategy that had failed. Under the rule of two, the Sith became a shadow organization, working to undermine the Republic from within. Secrecy and subtlety became their greatest weapons. Rituals, therefore, became more personal, more refined, and more insidious. The focus shifted from overt destruction to covert manipulation. Sith alchemy was no longer used to create monstrous beasts for battle, but to brew subtle poisons that could mimic natural diseases, to craft listening devices that were undetectable by technology, or to create artifacts that could slowly corrupt a target over months or years without them ever realizing it. Sorcery was turned towards espionage and foresight. A Sith Lord might perform a quiet ritual in a hidden sanctum to scry the future, not to see grand battles, but to predict stock market fluctuations that could bankrupt a Republic-loyal corporation, or to identify a key political figure whose secret ambitions could be exploited. Rituals of mental domination were honed to a razor's edge, allowing a Sith to subtly influence the thoughts of a senator from across the galaxy, planting seeds of doubt and paranoia that would eventually blossom into galactic conflict. The goal was no longer to conquer the galaxy through force, but to hollow it out from the inside, to corrupt its institutions and turn its own strengths against it, so that when the time was right, the entire rotten structure would collapse, and the Sith would rise to rule its remains. This new era of secrecy made the Sith more dangerous than ever before. Their forbidden rituals, now a scalpel rather than a club, wielded with a patience that could span generations. The pursuit of power under the rule of two reached its philosophical and practical apex with the Sith Lord, who styled himself Darth Plagueis the Wise. His obsession was not with conquest or personal glory in the traditional sense, but with the fundamental mechanics of life and death itself. He was a master of the most esoteric Sith arts, and his life's work revolved around a single, audacious goal: to achieve true immortality, not by inhabiting other bodies, but by conquering death through the manipulation of the very building blocks of life. Plagueis dedicated decades to the study of midichlorians. While the Jedi viewed these microscopic life forms as symbionts that acted as a bridge to the Force, Plagueis saw them as slaves to be commanded. He believed that if he could learn to control midichlorians directly, he could not only extend his own life indefinitely, but also influence the life and death of others at will. He could heal any wound, cure any disease, and even bring the dead back to life. His laboratory was a place of unspeakable horrors, where he performed countless experiments on living subjects, using Sith alchemy and forbidden rituals to try and unlock the secrets of midichlorian control. He learned to sustain his own life long past its natural span, and he could even keep his own apprentice alive after a mortal wound, a feat that he used to demonstrate his power. His ultimate ambition, however, was far grander. It was nothing less than the creation of life from scratch. Plagueis believed that through an incredibly powerful and complex ritual, he could use his own will to influence the midichlorians to spontaneously conceive a being, to create a body for a consciousness of his own design. This was the ultimate act of Sith hubris, an attempt to usurp the role of the Force itself and become a creator god. In the culmination of his life's work, he and his apprentice, a young Naboo politician named Palpatine, performed this great ritual. They meditated for weeks, pouring their combined power into the Force, concentrating their will to tip the cosmic scales and spark a new life into existence. But the Force is not a tool to be commanded. It is a living entity, and such a profound perversion of its nature could not go unanswered. The dark side ritual, in its attempt to create a being of ultimate power, seems to have provoked a reaction from the cosmic Force. As if in response to this unnatural act, the Force itself conceived a child, one born not of a father, but of the Force itself, a being with an unprecedented midichlorian count, destined to bring balance. This child was Anakin Skywalker. Plagueis' ritual, intended to be his greatest triumph and the key to his eternal reign, may have instead set in motion the very events that would lead to the Sith's ultimate destruction. This illustrates the supreme danger of Sith rituals. Their consequences are often unpredictable and can create ripples that change the fate of the galaxy in ways the caster could never have intended. This era also saw the refinement of rituals for foresight. The Sith have always sought to know the future, but unlike the Jedi, who passively receive visions, the Sith actively try to force the future into a path of their own choosing. A Sith Lord would use a variety of divination methods, from staring into the black depths of a shard of obsidian to meditating in chambers specifically designed to amplify psychic phenomena. They would use these visions to guide their long-term plans, the so-called Grand Plan, to destroy the Jedi and take over the Republic. But the dark side is a treacherous guide. The visions it offers are often clouded by the viewer's own fears and ambitions. It shows paths to victory that end in ruin, and it preys on paranoia, turning allies into suspected traitors. The very rituals the Sith use to secure their future often contain the seeds of their downfall, a paradox that lies at the very heart of the dark side's deceptive nature. The power of Sith rituals was not contained solely within the minds of the sorcerers. It was also stored and amplified through a variety of dark artifacts and tools. These objects were essential for the preservation and transmission of forbidden knowledge, and many were imbued with a malevolent power all their own, becoming weapons in their own right. Chief among these were the Sith holocrons. Outwardly, they resembled the crystalline datacrons used by the Jedi, typically pyramidal in shape and designed to store vast quantities of information. But the similarity ended there. A Jedi holocron was a passive library, a teaching tool that would freely offer its knowledge to any Jedi worthy of accessing it. A Sith holocron was a predator. It was not merely a storage device, but a sophisticated prison for the consciousness of its creator. Through a dark ritual, a Sith Lord could imbue the holocron's crystalline lattice with a perfect replica of their own mind, their memories, their personality, and their insatiable will. The holocron thus became a gatekeeper. To access its secrets, a prospective student had to engage with the gatekeeper consciousness directly. The spirit within the holocron would test the user, probing their weaknesses, tempting them with promises of power, and pushing them further down the path of the dark side. It was a sentient filter designed to ensure that only those who were truly committed to the Sith philosophy, those who were ruthless and ambitious enough, could learn its most profound secrets. These holocrons were one of the primary means by which Sith knowledge survived across the millennia, allowing the teachings of long-dead masters like Darth Bane or Darth Anderu to corrupt new generations of apprentices. They were eternal teachers, whispering their poison from beyond the grave. Beyond the holocrons, the Sith created a vast arsenal of ritualistic objects. Talismans and amulets were common, often worn by Sith Lords to augment their powers or protect them from harm. One of the most infamous of these was the Moor talisman, created by the ancient Sith Lord Carnes Moor. This amulet contained not only a portion of Muir's spirit, but also the power of a horrific alchemical plague. The talisman could transform any nearby sentient being into a mindless, savage creature known as a rock ghoul, utterly subservient to the will of the talisman's bearer. The Gauntlet of Kresh the Younger was another such artifact, an alchemically altered glove that could generate a protective field and amplify its wearer's dark side abilities to terrifying levels. Weapons, too, were the subject of intense ritualistic forging. While later Sith would primarily wield lightsabers, the ancient Sith perfected the creation of Sith swords. Forged from special ores and subjected to intense alchemical processes, these blades were then quenched in the blood of sacrifices. The forging ritual would often involve binding a spirit, sometimes that of a conquered foe, into the very metal of the blade. The resulting weapon was an object of pure malice. It was unnaturally strong, capable of deflecting a lightsaber blow, and its touch was poison to a Jedi. A wound from a Sith sword did not just damage the body, it severed the victim's connection to the light side of the Force, creating a spiritual injury that was almost impossible to heal. The scrolls, tomes, and tablets that recorded the rituals themselves were often artifacts of power. They were not written with simple ink. The most powerful incantations were inscribed in blood on scrolls made of flayed skin, the pain of the victim infusing the text with dark energy. To even read such a text was to invite corruption, as the words themselves seemed to writhe with a life of their own, whispering promises into the reader's mind. These tools were not inert objects. They were extensions of the dark side, saturated with its energy and purpose, ensuring that the legacy of the Sith and their forbidden rites would endure even when the Sith themselves were but ghosts and memories. The Jedi Order was not ignorant of the existence of Sith sorcery. They were terrified of it. Their entire philosophy was built on harmony, balance, and letting go of attachment and fear. Sith rituals were the antithesis of everything they stood for, representing a path of domination, corruption, and the violent seizure of power. The Jedi believed that this knowledge was not merely dangerous in the wrong hands, but that it was a contagion, an intellectual poison that could corrupt anyone who studied it, no matter how pure their intentions. The simple act of learning the words of a Sith incantation or understanding the principles of Sith alchemy could create a small fissure in a Jedi's spirit, a crack through which the dark side could begin to seep. For this reason, the official policy of the Jedi Council was one of absolute suppression. They sought to find and destroy every trace of this forbidden lore. Jedi Knights were dispatched on missions to track down Sith texts, scrolls, and artifacts. When such objects were found, they were, in most cases, destroyed. Sith tomes were burned, alchemical equipment was smashed, and cursed weapons were melted down in the heart of a star. The Jedi believed that such knowledge was too great a temptation, and that the only way to safeguard the galaxy was to erase it from existence completely. However, some artifacts and nexuses of power were too strong to be easily destroyed. The tombs in the Valley of the Dark Lords on Korriban, for instance, were so deeply steeped in the dark side that they resisted all attempts at cleansing. Similarly, the spirit of a powerful Sith Lord like Exar Kun, bound to his temples on Yavin 4, could not be exorcised. In these cases, the Jedi resorted to containment. They would perform a ritual of their own, often involving many Jedi Masters working in concert to create a wall of light. This was a barrier of pure light side energy designed to seal away a dark side nexus or trap a dark spirit, preventing its influence from spreading. But these were temporary measures at best, a bandage on a festering wound. The darkness could be contained, but it was rarely ever truly vanquished. Recognizing the peril of total destruction, lest they lose the knowledge of how to combat such threats in the future, the Council sanctioned the creation of a secret vault deep within the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Here, they stored the Sith holocrons and other artifacts that were too dangerous or too resilient to be destroyed. This library of darkness was accessible only to members of the Jedi Council, and even then, permission to study its contents was granted only in the most dire of circumstances. They believed that by locking the knowledge away, they could control it. Yet, this policy of suppression and secrecy created its own vulnerabilities. By forbidding any study of the dark side, they left their own knights unprepared for its insidious temptations. Jedi who encountered the allure of Sith power for the first time were often caught off guard, their curiosity piqued by the very thing their masters had forbidden them to understand. This fear of the unknown made the Sith's promises of power even more seductive. The history of the Jedi Order is marked by the story of the Lost 20, a succession of Jedi Masters who peacefully chose to leave the Order over its long history. While their reasons varied, and not all fell to the dark side, their existence was a constant reminder that even the most powerful and wise could lose their way. For some, the departure was a rejection of the Jedi's dogmatic fear of emotion and their refusal to engage with the deeper mysteries of the Force, a path that for a few led directly into the waiting arms of the shadows and the study of the very rituals the Jedi sought to bury. Despite the Jedi's relentless crusade to purge the galaxy of this corrupting knowledge, the legacy of the Sith and their forbidden rituals proved impossible to extinguish. The dark side is patient, and its secrets have a way of surviving, buried in the dust of forgotten worlds or locked away in the minds of spectral gatekeepers. The knowledge persisted, a slumbering virus waiting for a new host. It endured in the crumbling tombs of Korriban and Dixun, where the spirits of ancient Dark Lords whispered their secrets to any who were foolish or ambitious enough to listen. It survived in the forgotten ruins of Sith temples on planets like Malachor and Dromund Kaas, their stones still resonating with the echoes of ancient, terrible rites. Most potently, it persisted within the Sith holocrons, artifacts of pure malice that could wait for centuries, even millennia, for a hand to reach out and unlock their secrets. The cycle of corruption was thus doomed to repeat itself throughout galactic history. A curious scholar might unearth a Sith tablet on a routine archaeological dig. A disgraced politician, desperate for power, might purchase a rumored Sith artifact on the black market. A fallen Jedi, cast out from the Order and seeking a new source of strength, might follow the whispers of legends to a hidden tomb. In every case, the introduction to Sith lore began a chain reaction. The initial promise was always intoxicating: power to protect one's loved ones, knowledge to right perceived wrongs, the strength to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. But the rituals demanded a price. A small sacrifice would lead to a larger one. A minor act of selfishness would pave the way for a greater atrocity. The user, believing they were in control, would be slowly twisted and remade by the very power they sought to command, their noble intentions curdling into paranoia, greed, and hatred until they were indistinguishable from the Dark Lords they once sought to understand or surpass. The rituals were not just a set of instructions, they were a self-perpetuating ideology of destruction. The ultimate legacy of these forbidden practices is a permanent scar upon the Force itself. The galaxy is haunted by the actions of the Sith. The planets where they built their empires and performed their darkest rites remain tainted, places where the light side feels distant and the air is thick with fear and despair. The echoes of mass sacrifices still scream in the cosmic background, a testament to the countless lives consumed to fuel their ambition. The spirits of the most powerful Dark Lords, having defied death through their rituals, linger as malevolent phantoms, their will still capable of influencing the physical world. The struggle between the Jedi and the Sith is often seen as a simple conflict between good and evil, but the existence of Sith rituals reveals a deeper truth. It is a fundamental war between cosmic philosophies. The Jedi's path of harmony, acceptance, and living as a part of the Force versus the Sith's path of domination, defiance, and forcing the universe to bend to one's will. The forbidden rituals are the ultimate expression of this Sith ideology. They represent the desire to control life, to command death, to conquer fate, and to impose order through power. They are a monument to the seductive allure of the abyss, a timeless warning that the quest for absolute power inevitably leads to absolute corruption. The shadow of these rites is long, a darkness that stretches from the dawn of history to the endless future, a permanent and chilling reminder that some knowledge is too terrible to be known, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.